the 21st century, those who change the world are those who change the culture. They get people in sync, lead tribes, create movements, and generate an energy field where ordinary people achieve extraordinary results.
So let me first define what I mean when I say growth stage. It's, sometimes people use the word growth stage, sometimes scale up. It's basically that weird middle part of a company's journey once it locks in something resembling product market fit, right? The first stage of a company is always like, we've got this hypothesis, maybe it works, maybe it makes sense, maybe somebody's willing to pay for it. And then you hustle and you grind. And if you're one of the lucky few, you lock in product market fit, meaning you've built something that has real intrinsic value for a certain part of the market. And, that then usually translates to this like, okay, we're no longer on the hunt. Like, what is the thing we're building? We've got something locked in. Let's scale this. Let's make it 10x, 100x. And that triggers that scale up journey, which is very different than the first part of the journey.
I'm Aga Bayer, and this is the CultureLab podcast, where you will find ideas and inspiration on how to harness the power of team and organizational culture. I talk to leadership thinkers, culture experts, entrepreneurs, and all sorts of movers and shakers, and together we explore the fascinating topic of culture, leadership, and personal growth. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Or better yet, write a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your followers and friends on social media. For more, check out our archive at www.agabayer.com/podcast. Hey, this is Aga. Welcome to episode 68 of the CultureLab podcast. We're back after a short Christmas break. I hope that this year is off to a good start wherever you are in the world. I know that it's been an extremely turbulent time all over the world, but at least in your personal life, I hope that things are going well and you are keeping safe and healthy. This episode is brought to you by the Culture Strategy Bootcamp, a virtual bootcamp that helps you create a thriving culture at scale. If you're a leader in a company that grows, and if you want to start turning your strategy and your culture into rocket fuel for meaningful growth, definitely check this out. We're putting together the first cohort of founders and leaders who want to strengthen their culture building and strategy shaping muscles. And just this once, we offer a 50% discount in tuition fees. You can learn more about the bootcamp by typing this into your browser: bit.ly/culture-bootcamp. That's bit.ly/culture-bootcamp. Hurry, because seats are limited. And now let me introduce my guest today, Tommi Forsström. Tommi is a product leadership expert who specializes in growth stage companies that navigate the adolescence of a company, from product market fit to IPO. He paid his dues in the Nokia-driven, engineering-heavy Finnish tech scene in the 2000s, and then he moved to New York exactly at the point when the city was waking up to product management and also to building fast-growing, sustainable companies. His mission is to help product leaders bust out of the product management bubble and to learn to lead cross-functionally and speak the language of business. He's currently head of product at Teachable. Tommi and I had such a juicy conversation. I think it will be especially useful for those of you who are in the high growth stage or just about to scale. But even if you are not in a startup or a scale up, definitely tune in. There's so much goodness in what Tommi is sharing about trust, collaboration, evolving your culture, taking evidence-based decisions, and developing products that customers love. Tommi, welcome to the CultureLab.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really glad that you are here and really happy that we have this opportunity to discuss your journey and your experience with building cultures in high growth companies. So, before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'll try and go for the short to medium version. So I started out in tech way back in the late 90s. I'm born and raised in Helsinki, Finland. And as anybody my age, kind of in the late Generation X stage, I grew up in a very engineering heavy, Nokia driven tech scene in Finland where let's just say things like culture, product, strategy, those things weren't really the biggest thing. It was just like, engineers just build cool things well engineered and good things will happen because that was kind of the Nokia playbook. So I spent my first 10 years in, I was an engineer, then an engineering manager, growing up in an environment where it was all about the tech. It was all about the engineering. And then I moved to New York City in 2012, around the time when New York was just waking up to the world of product management, and I got swept into that trend or that movement where Silicon Valley had been doing product management for a good decade, driven by companies like Facebook, like Google, and so on. And I got really swept into that. And then the last decade or so, I've been in the world of product management, product leadership. And the reason why culture is such a huge part of that is for the vast majority of what you do as a product manager or a product leader is you're trying to influence and make change happen. And that is to a huge degree cultural. Can you have a culture of learning? Can you have a culture of change? So for me, the reason I'm most excited about being on this specific podcast is we get to talk about this part of my journey that usually you don't really get to talk about as a product leader. So in New York City, I've worked at a number of different companies. I was VP of product at Shutterstock. I was in like a kind of GM product leader position at Splice. I did a year of product leadership consulting at a small product consultancy called Products Labs, working for Insight Partners, a venture capital company. And more recently, for the past year and a half, I've been VP of product and a part of the executive team at Teachable.
Yeah, that's an amazing career path. And I definitely want to learn a little bit more about this and how you have evolved as a leader. Doing all these amazing things. But before we go there, I just want to zoom in on your job title and what does a person who, because you refer to yourself as a growth stage product leader, specializing in life after product market fit. And so I want to ask for our listeners, what does a growth stage product leader do?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that I keep finding more and more answers myself every single day. So let me first define what I mean when I say growth stage. It's, sometimes people use the word growth stage, sometimes scale up. It's basically that weird middle part of a company's journey once it locks in something resembling product market fit, right? The first stage of a company is always like, we've got this hypothesis, maybe it works, maybe it makes sense, maybe somebody's willing to pay for it. And then you hustle and you grind. And if you're one of the lucky few, you lock in product market fit, meaning you've built something that has real intrinsic value for a certain part of the market. And, that then usually translates to this like, okay, we're no longer on the hunt. Like, what is the thing we're building? We've got something locked in. Let's scale this. Let's make it 10x, 100x. And that triggers that scale up journey, which is very different than the first part of the journey. And the growth stage generally, the next bookend, in my opinion, is somewhere in the IPO or other big liquidity event when you get acquired by a larger company or you list in the public markets, at which point you're kind of in that portfolio stage where it's no longer about a single product. And so what I do, what my kind of core competency is like my job, first of all, from the product leadership standpoint, is trying to excavate or almost be like an archaeologist to what is the product that the early stage of this company built. And if we truly have something that can be labeled product market fit, what is the part of the product? What is the part of the market? Because that's what generally doesn't get acknowledged when talking about product market fit. It's never the whole product. It's never the whole market. So from a very kind of tactical perspective, it's always just kind of drilling into the weeds of like, what is really the strongest part of our offering and who does it generate value for, so that we can really focus on that and start the next stage or continue our growth and build new layers on it based on what we're actually doing well, and not try and build on things that don't work. So that's kind of the kind of the really concrete part of what I do day to day. The other part, of course, is building a team. And when I say team, there's many different org models where, for example, in my job right now, I have product management, product design, and product operations reporting into me. And I have a VP of engineering counterpart to whom all of our engineers report into. And myself and Aaron, our VP of engineering, basically form this, two humans, one mind, very deeply symbiotic relationship. Because at the end of the day, engineering, product management, product design, none of those can really achieve anything alone. So I'm a strong proponent for org models where at the end of the day, all of those competencies that are needed to build, maintain, and evolve your product all kind of think as one function, and preferably actually report into one person in the executive level. But so really building that team, like what is the holistic team needed for our products, present and future, that is a huge part of my job. And at the same time, not just like what is the team, how does it operate, what tools does it use, what are the protocols, the practices, the checklists, the stage gates involved. And then lastly, as a member of the executive team, it's funny I say this as the last piece, but in my opinion, the most important one is how does the thing you build, the product, the thing that your company is taking to market, how does that connect to all the other functions or departments that the company needs to actually make good out of that product? Like a product alone is not enough. You have to have strong people to take it to market, whether you're sales driven, marketing driven, even if you're product driven growth, you still need people to take it to market, and you need people to maintain and operate it, whether it's your, customer care, whether it's, solutions engineers or anything of that, all those other departments, even the financial and the accounting, how does the product connect to all the other departments? So for me, as an executive, my first and foremost responsibility always is to connect to other departments. So yeah, I think that's a very wild description of my job.
Yeah, that has been super helpful. So basically, you have these three main areas, and I have questions about all of them. And going back to the first one that you mentioned, which is strictly around the product and identifying which parts of the product you can build on, I'm curious, and I think a lot of our listeners will be curious as well. What is the hardest thing about doing it well? Because it can be really quite difficult, I think, particularly when you are deep into the work. Very often it's hard really to tell what are the things that you need to keep and build on, and what are the things that are just not the right fit. So I realize that this is a science and it's impossible to really explain everything in just a couple of minutes. But what is the hardest thing, and what are the most important things to think about to be able to identify those things?
Yeah, this really boils back down into almost any change agency or creating change. So usually when you go into the growth stage, you've built way too much product and you've sold to way too many people, and you're already kind of struggling to make sure that you have growth that's sustainable and continuous. So the hardest part, honestly, is especially somebody like me coming in at that startup to scale up transformations beginning, is first of all, it again boils down to a huge cultural component. You have to start killing the darlings of some of the people who were there before you. it's helping everybody around you see what matters and, more importantly, what does not. So for example, just identifying parts of your product that you just need to sunset, you just need to remove because they are either a constant millstone around your neck or they're really just not useful for your product's continued growth. So like sunsetting a product is not that hard, or sunsetting a part of a product is not that hard. You make a plan, you communicate it, blah, 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 you shut it down. The bigger problem is the emotions behind it. Somebody built that thing. They're proud of it. They always have this lingering, like, what if we just tweaked a couple of things? Maybe it would start working. So you have to really learn how to get people to buy in to the fact that we need to start deprecating some parts, or we need to stop selling to certain types of customers. That's the other thing. Some of the company or all of the company might be very infatuated with a certain customer type. Even if the numbers scream, you should not be selling to this type of customer. So it's a really emotional journey, and it all boils down to the company realizing what got us here won't get us there, and to also assess itself from like are we suffering from sunk cost fallacy? Should we be selling to these people with whom we have a really tight relationship with? And then just the problematics of, if you have parts of your product that are out there that have people actively using it, sunsetting different parts or even stopping to sell to some types of customers might have short-term negative results, meaning, you might have angry customers, you might have people churn, you might have a harder time acquiring if you reconfigure who you're selling to. So really, like, just navigating those emotions is by far the hardest part of my job.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like there is a lot of influencing skills required. And I wonder where you start this journey. It also sounds, of course, that it's very data-driven. So what is the starting point? Is the starting point getting everyone on the same page as far as the vision for the company and for the future success is? Where do you usually start?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, except I'd like to swap in one word. It's very evidence-driven, not so much data. I'm not the biggest fan of our industry often dividing qualitative and quantitative into kind of two separate camps. As far as I'm concerned, especially for the change agency component, you can't just have one or the other. To really get people to follow you on a journey and to change their thinking, you need a healthy diet that's equal parts qualitative and quantitative. Because a huge part of change is you need to know how different people, or what types of rationale different people react to. Some people are very emotional thinkers, and they won't change their thinking unless they can really feel tactile, human anecdotes, quotes, whatnot, and really like see the people in their mind. Versus some people are just very rational thinkers, and if they can't have a spreadsheet or like a report with like really tangible numbers that they can extrapolate on. And the problem with trying to change a whole organization is you're always going to have a mix and match of both. So to me, it usually always starts with, some level of a research project, right? You start digging into the data, both qual and quant. You see what the numbers tell you. You see where what the story the numbers can provide, and then you start augmenting with qualitative research. You start doing the interviews. And frankly, also leveraging that feedback cycle of when you do qualitative research, you start learning what are other avenues in quantitative that you can use to build a better story. And then at the end of the day, for me, it really starts from this holistic narrative with qual and quant, and more importantly, a strong bridge between them. Whether it's like user personas, whether it's a 1-year vision or a 5-year vision, that doesn't really matter. There has to be something central for people to focus on that you can start building on. and it has to feel real, and it has to be believable from a numbers perspective.
And so basically, you absolutely need to find a way to speak to people's minds as well as their hearts and have arguments at each side. And as you say, have something central, a focal point for everyone to focus on. This is super useful. And I don't think that in many companies, decisions about product are necessarily being taken this way. So I can only imagine that our listeners are getting a lot of value through this. So the second area that you mentioned in terms of what your job is all about is leading teams and building teams. And so again, asking about the hard stuff, what would you say is the hardest thing about leading engineers?
Yeah, I think I can very much empathize with what I'm about to say. So when I was an engineer in Finland and an engineering manager, I worked a lot with and for Nokia. That was a very early adopter of agile principles and lean overall as a set of methodologies. So I got very indoctrinated at an early age to building software should be an explorative and iterative process that generally does not benefit from a measure twice, cut once type of approach, where you just like build a project and then your excellence is gauged by how well you can progress to a predefined plan. But it was a long journey, and this was a very small subset of engineering in the world that really understood this, and then layered on top of, like, it's not about building, like, it's not about software engineering, it's about building software that is not just the result of the work of engineers, it's the work of designers and product managers, so we know we can build the right software the right way for the right reasons. And so even though we've had all these methodologies, all this, like, the rich body of work of many public thinkers in the product and engineering space, the vast majority of the world still operates on this very like project-based model, this agency model, where just somebody give us the spec and we'll turn it around. and a lot of the practices, processes, patterns, measurements are built around the notion of like how well can we define a spec, how well can we execute on a spec, and very little impetus on, first of all, how fast can we react to change, how well does the thing that we're building actually create the outcome that we're after, and not so much the focus of somebody told us to build a widget, we told them we can build that widget in 6 months, we built it in 5.5 months, we're great, whether or not that widget generated the outcomes that were desired. So for me, and this is not solely for engineering, it's also product designers and product managers who have a hard time with, number one, breaking the boundaries between those functions, so truly embracing cross-functional work as a benefit, and number two, getting from the outputs to outcomes mindset, where it's not about can you build the thing, it's about does the thing actually generate the business and customer outcomes that you're after.
And, even established companies that have been around for decades face exactly the same challenges. And so I'm really curious, have you learned anything that works in terms of encouraging people to engage in that cross-functional collaboration and also shifting that mindset more towards outcomes and the things that we produce being fit for purpose rather than just efficiency, speed, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I don't think I've found any silver bullets or anything that's like, yeah, just do this and the world will open up for you. But I think overall, whenever you're trying to elicit change in anybody, you have to meet them where they are. You have to figure out why their thinking is in the patterns that they are, why they choose to prioritize a certain thing. And for whether it's engineers or product designers or product managers, for me, the first thing is really shining a light to the connection between what those people what the outcome of their work really is, how it connects to the business, spark an interest in the financials, the numbers, the business side of things, and help them elevate their thinking around not just like, okay, we're doing code or we're building interfaces or we're shipping features, but to really think about like, what is this company doing? How is it performing financially? And that to me is why I love the growth stage so much, is that it is a stage when companies generally, number one, they're big enough where the numbers actually make sense and they matter, but they're small enough to where they're not financially engineered to death, where you open up a P&L and you're like, this is not human language, I don't know what this says. And generally companies haven't really like created that opacity where like, oh, you're not in the executive team, you don't have access to any financials. So it's usually a great stage to spark people's interests in the financials and use that as leverage to start asking, not even asking, but planting those questions of what are we doing? Why are we working this way? What are we optimizing for? And because often when I join companies, they often have very deep walls between these different functions where like, okay, engineers are here, engineers operate in these ways, these are the teams for engineers. Then product designers, they're the ones with the funny glasses, they sit in that corner over there. And then product managers, I don't know, they just drop some slideware on us every now and then. And there's like very clear APIs between these functions. Like here's the software development lifecycle. Here's where the discovery and exploration happens. Somebody creates a deck, dumps it into Jira. Then somebody makes a polished design on the user experience. Again, spec gets dumped into Jira or whatever. So starting to really ask those questions of what is this workflow optimizing for? Why? What is the benefit? And is it really like if this is the way where we allow for people to work on their core expertise the most, does that optimize for that single function or does that optimize for the actual big picture? Meaning, yes, we can probably crunch through a feature in the fastest and most efficient way with this workflow. But if that feature isn't fit for purpose, doesn't generate good outcomes, what's the cost of changing things around as we discover new things? So really starting to get people interested in the whole big picture outside of like optimizing for their single functions execution.
I think that having that line of sight can be tremendously empowering because then you basically understand what you can do from where you sit to really contribute to what you're trying to do as an organization. And it's equally true for the financials as it is for the overall mission of the company. And my personal experience is that sometimes we don't do that well when it comes to creating that line of sight, whether it's around the mission and why we exist as a company generally, and also what are we trying to achieve in financial terms as well. So I find that these are really super important points. So this is awesome, and I love that. That conversation about tearing down walls and having people collaborate and work towards a common goal. I suppose that there's going to be a similar theme when we talk about the third area of your role, which was sitting on the executive team and making sure that all the parts are connected. So first of all, what I want to say is a lot of our listeners don't have a CPO yet in their company. And so maybe we should start from this point. Why do you think, first of all, that companies that are currently in the growth stage, should they hire a person who's responsible for product? And if yes, why? I mean, you've talked a lot already about the value that you generate in your role, but overall, why do you think that this role is so important? And why is it so important to have a person responsible for product sitting as on the senior leadership team?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I don't generally think it has to be called CPO. That's the way the industry seems to be trending, that we are calling the executive responsible for the thing that we build and sell. And just to make sure I'm explicit, I'm talking about companies that build and sell software. So and generally SaaS companies overall. That's my wheelhouse. I think there needs to be a single executive responsible for cradle to grave, the whole thing we sell. Whether it's called CTO, CPO, Chief R&D Officer, whatever, I don't really care. What I care about is there needs to be a single person in the executive team responsible for the entirety of the thing that we sell. I think the question of should a growth stage company hire a CPO depends wildly on a number of factors, because a really good 360 CPO is, number one, really hard to find today still, as we are still building these people. We're training the CTOs of the world to be product minded, or we're building the kind of VPs of product to be cross-functionally minded enough that they can confidently and credibly lead engineering, product management, and product design. So it's really hard to find these people today. And so I think it's a number of factors. Number one, how far can the founder CEO really scale themselves? Because I have a fairly strong hypothesis that until product market fit, if your CEO is not the either de facto or the implicit or explicit product leader, you will never see the growth stage. So how far can the CEO really, hand to heart, scale themselves as the person on the leadership team responsible for the product? The second thing really is there really somebody who can emerge in the org, whether it's the CTO or the VP of engineering, VP of product, or whoever, who's capable at scaling to that level of cross-functional responsibility, where they can not only lead engineers, not only lead product managers, not only lead product designers, but they can speak the language of finance. They can speak strategy, speak business, and they can be that connecting tissue in the leadership team that isn't just like a delivery org for sales or kind of the, we'll ship this feature then, but can actually give clarity to all the other departments. What are we building here? Why are we building it? Who should we be selling it for? Who should we be marketing it for? How should we be supporting it? So I think, obviously from a selfish perspective, yes, everybody should go out shopping for great chief product officers. But when is the right time? I think really bringing in a seasoned CPO is somewhere in that mid growth stage, $30 to $50 million a year, when you're clearly already exploiting your growth well, and you can really afford to get a real CPO, because this is a hard hire to make. It's an expensive hire to make, and you don't want to make this wrong. It will cost your company at least 2 years of growth if you hired for this role wrong. So if you're in that kind of, oh crap, I think we have product market fit stage, somewhere like 5 to 10 million, just having a really good VP of product or VP of engineering in place, or having good seasoned product managers, and having the CEO or COO or whoever you have, kind of that the spiritual leader of the company, having them step up already carries you quite far.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. This is really so important. I think that what you have just said, that this is going to set you back 2 years at least in your growth, it's quite powerful. It's really a punch in the gut. So that it's definitely something for our listeners to think about. I want us to now shift gears a little bit and talk about culture. We met at the Champions of Change event. You haven't met me. I was just participating and following your session, which was very interesting. And you said something that struck me as really insightful, because you said it's not about the speed of shipping, but shipping the right things in the right way. And you've alluded to this again, which I think is a very common thing that we hear everywhere is velocity, velocity, velocity. We really need to ship fast. And so basically you're saying it's not about that. It's about shipping the right thing in the right way. And then you also said, in the end, you ship your culture. So can you elaborate on that? How does your company culture impact your product?
Yeah, that's definitely a topic very near and dear to me. So first of all, on the velocity or shipping fast, I do think it's really important to ship fast when it comes to shipping things for learning, right? Like if you ship slowly or you never put anything in front of people, you never learn. And the less you learn, the worse your product's going to be. So I think when I say shipping the right things in the right way, under the hood, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening, like a lot of stuff going in front of people. What I want to pump the brakes on aggressively in the whole industry is this notion of like, the faster you can expand your product footprint, the more successful you are. Nothing will kill your growth more than just an irresponsibly bloated product footprint, especially one where you have no eject button with things that you've shipped. So this is something that is a huge part of this. What got us here won't get us there. Thinking of in the early stage of a company, it really is just hustle and grind and ship every idea you've had, because you have no idea what's going to work and what won't. And you have no evidence and no real proof. But that mindset inevitably will get you into trouble, even if it's like trouble that comes after you become phenomenally successful. But I have not met a growth stage CEO yet, like a founder CEO, who's not regularly walking around the office, or I guess Zoom nowadays, having a nervous breakdown on why are we shipping so little? We haven't shipped anything in ages. And it's really it's the compounding effects of, if you're handcuffed to a mountain, you're not going to run very fast. But the mountain is just always invisible. You just, or I think I used this also in the summit, like it was expressed in Fight Club, the things you own end up owning you. And so my thing about not being a feature factory, not being, the fastest expander of your product footprint, is that the cost of that footprint exponentially increases and brings down your ability to ship anything more. So it's really diminishing returns, right? So there's this weird built-in like juxtaposition between shipping fast with the intent of learning, meaning you're shipping things that don't go in front of everybody or can be shot down at a moment's notice, that you don't commit to, so that you can keep the feedback cycle rolling as fast as possible, but being very, very diligent about what you allow to the permanent long-term product footprint that you have, because that's what will end up killing you in the long term. And this is what
that decision, by the way, Tommy, sorry for interjecting here, it's already a culture related decision, right? Because you have to have a certain mindset and a certain understanding and a certain way of doing things to be able to say that we are not going to be chasing that product footprint like crazy just for the size of it. So going back to my question, how does your culture impact your product? That's definitely one of the ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly like you said, is cultural. And part of what I try to usually assert around that startup to scale up transformation is that is the culture, like the culture of building fast, expanding footprint fast, expanding from zero. You have to expand fast because you have to get different variations of your hypothesis or different solutions to what you think will be the right thing out there as fast as possible. And you can't afford to be meek about it. You can't afford to kind of, we're going to do some focus groups and we're going to do some experiments. Like, no, ship product fast. That's the only way you can build from zero to product market fit, is you execute. Nothing is holding you back. Nothing is making you slow. But the problem really is that then becomes culture. Like culture, you don't create culture. Culture is the outcome of your actions, your, all that good stuff. So there's a huge survivor bias here, obviously, because the companies that make it out of the startup stage alive are always the ones who've had a culture of just like build, like take on tech debt, take on business debt, take on compliance debt, any kind of debt you can swing, just build it fast. And so it becomes culture. But then that product market fit growth stage thing slaps you in the face and you're like, we can keep pouring money into our R&D. We can bring in an army of developers that cost us a gazillion dollars just to keep up that pace and make it exponentially harder for us to move rapidly. So the culture really has to change, right? To the you cannot grow as a function of your product footprint size anymore. So that to me is really, it's not just about culture, it's about needing to change culture midstream, which again, culture, you can't just say like, okay, this was our culture, this is now our culture. You have to put in the time and energy to change people's hearts and minds.
Yeah. So this is really fascinating to me, because basically what you're saying is that there is a point during your growth where you really need to start thinking about culture change, not just building a culture, but be very, very conscious about the fact, again, what you said before, what got us here is not going to get us there. And even culturally, like in terms of that bias to whatever, shipping fast, blah, 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 we really need to start doing things slightly differently and be very intentional about it. Which is not, I have to say that it's not necessarily the way I see people think about this. So I haven't had a lot of conversations where people would say, well, we are aware that now is the time not just to shift gears in terms of how we do our business, but also we are actually now entering a phase of a culture change.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And it takes a lot of broad visibility to understand, because culture is such a lagging indicator, and cultural changes overall happen really slowly. It never slaps you in the face like, okay, we need to change cultures here, because it's hard to see from the numbers or the metrics that most companies follow, and it's hard to really know. Like, you need to have this like broader systems thinking to understand what influences what. And frankly, you just also need to have experience. You need to have people in leadership positions who've done this before, because a lot of it is you can't learn it from books, you can't learn it from podcasts, except this podcast. You have to have seen it play out over and over and over again. That's why like there's so many companies that succeed out of the startup stage with very inexperienced people, because that is the stage where like just sweat, tears, hustle, grind, instinct, and a little bit of good luck will get you through the day. None of those things carry you through the what's happening next.
Can you please repeat that? Because I think people really need to hear that, honestly. Let's just not glaze over that. Seriously, this is so important. Please say that again.
So companies come out of the startup stage all the time with very inexperienced people, because the vast majority of it is just hustle, grind, instinct, just a lot of effort and a little bit of good luck, which is not really what it takes to thrive in the growth stage, where you need experience, you need pattern recognition, and you need to have gone through that journey multiple times before.
So, since it is a podcast about culture, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper here. So, when you are entering the growth stage, what would you say is the biggest culture-related challenge that you really need to be aware of and pay attention to?
I don't know exactly what the biggest is, so I'm going to rattle off some of the top of mind things that I know always are a huge part. Number one is especially as a CPO, you have to be super mindful of what sort of emotions are driving the founder CEO's journey, because that person is the number one catalyst of culture change, and how they react to all of this is basically the number one make or break thing. Because again, the way you are successful in the early stages, you need to have somebody at the helm who's ridiculously brilliant, can operate in every possible context, meaning this founder CEO has probably been in charge of every single product decision, every single marketing decision, probably been a part of like 70% of the successful sales calls. They've probably built the financial models. It's usually that the CEO's ability to be omnipresent in the early stage is such a common pattern. And they're usually, obviously, their founder CEO. They've got not just their personal finances, but also their personal brand riding on the success of this thing. So it's so deeply emotional for the founder CEO often, and not just emotional, but also very rational. It's like I said, the difference between coming out of the startup stage and successfully navigating to IPO can literally be the make or break of, like, do they have a cushy life as a part-time angel investor or VC lined up for the rest of their lives, or will they just get like a nice modest exit that, you know, they have to start their next company kind of under the gun right away. So really, the number one thing there, like, can you win over the CEO? Can you get them to see themselves as the single point of failure? Can you let them hand over the reins to people who are probably going to do a worse job at some of those things than they are? And can you get them to fall out of love with the things that have driven success without pushing them too much out? Because again, like, you're dealing with a person who's probably the smartest person in the company, probably has the best context, probably has, you know, just generally is loaded with critical assets, or can give a lot of value to the company. So how do you help them lead by example? Like, I am no longer a part of every single thing. I no longer necessarily know better in every single detail, but I'm still here. I'm still the, you know, the central leadership figure. I'm the chief evangelist. I'm the person that you want to come to if you want to know anything about the early stage of this company. So it's really, like, I keep using the analogy of organizational adolescence for the growth stage. It is, you know, I don't know how old your average listener is. I'm in my 40s, so I have very selective memories of my adolescence, but I remember it as very like anxiety inducing, stressful. You know, it's even scary, but it's also exhilarating,
especially for our parents.
Right. I'm luckily my child is 3 years old, so I've still got a few years before I can.
Yeah.
I have to watch that from the sidelines. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that it's a period when you're not a child and you're not an adult, and there's no like morning that you wake up that I'm now an adult. So it's this transition, and so that's kind of, especially for the CEO, handing over the reins while still being a part of everything and being able to provide that guidance is really critical in a way that just doesn't go away right away. But going back to your original question, for the culture change involved, that person's actions, especially as it relates to the first 100 employees or so, that's the most critical thing. Can the CEO lead and show by word and by action that they are bought into what got us here won't get us there? Are they able to hand over the reins? Are they able to actively start changing their narrative? So to me, as an executive, as a leader coming in at the growth stage, number one, first of all, can you build that bond of trust with the CEO, and can you see them change their habits? And again, like, I want to underline, it's not them changing their habits; it's you winning them over, you putting in the work to prove to them, to get them to buy in, and then subsequently change their actions.
Totally. And this is so, so useful for everyone, because people, our listeners, will always reach out and say, how can I convince our CEO to do A, B, C, D, and D? And it's true that if they're not on board, then it's just not going to happen. So there is no denying that. And I think for the CEOs who are listening to this and founders, that, yeah, it's something to reflect on. You know, how open can you be to, first of all, hiring the people who can help you go through this transition? People who, as you say, have been through the stage and have the skills and the experience to guide you. But then how open can you be to their suggestions and really trust their judgment and be the role model of that whole mindset of what got us here is not going to get us there.
Yeah, if you don't mind, like, one thing I do want to underline, especially for all the product leaders out there and for all the CEOs out there, this is a relationship of trust. And none of y'all product leaders get to be like, well, the CEO just needs to trust me. No, they don't. They've got their personal brand riding on this. They've got their future finances might vary tens of millions, hundreds of millions, even larger sums of money. So these people have no real reason to trust you as somebody coming out of the woodwork and just be like, okay, this is how this company needs to be run from here on out. You have to work for it. You have to like put in the time. And sometimes you'll have to also concede that, you might not have earned that trust yet. And you've got to let them, here and there micromanage a little bit. Same thing for CEOs. You got to make them work for it. You don't have to, you need to feel that this person or these people that you're bringing in are empathetic to what you're going through. You're going through a journey of change where people are basically asking you to entrust them with what might be the thing that builds your legacy. So this should not be it's super easy to say like, oh yeah, you all should just build trust. Like, drill into what that means. What is like product leaders understand what that founder CEO is going through, because those are some big things.
Yeah, that's so important. And speaking of journeys of change, you have had such an impressive career path. So I'm assuming that you have been growing and evolving all the time yourself. And so I'm sure that you have thought about this. So I have a bit of a personal question for you, but not entirely, still professional. So my question is, how would you describe the better version of yourself that you want to grow into in the coming year?
Eek. It's just going to get very self-reflective. I don't have like this big, like, if I change this thing, everything will be better. Every year that I try and up the stakes, up the ante of my professional career, I make some mistakes. I kind of start questioning some of the things I held true before. I'm sure if I listen to this podcast a year from now, I'll basically just like turn it off and write myself off as a total idiot. I think honestly right now, having gone through a year of market conditions driven hypergrowth at Teachable, let's face it, our business has been going through massive growth this year. And as much as I'd love to take credit for it, we've basically just been strapped to a rocket ship, and most of our excellence is just trying to hold on. So I really want to understand both first of all, like, how could I have leveraged these very affluent months better? How could I have been more paranoid about what if this is just very temporary market conditions, and what if it ends abruptly at some point? I want to really question some of the the choices I've made. And honestly, it again comes back to, I have all these lofty theories that I've been sharing here today. A lot of it's based on, repeated anecdotes and empirics, but it's one thing to have pattern recognition. It's another thing to subject it to actual real life tests. So again, for me, what's important in 2021 is that some of the successes that I found in 2020 that I wasn't banking on, that I learn how to really repeat those, and some of those mistakes that I've made, that I will never repeat those again. And it really just comes through a reflection of what are the patterns that I've observed in the past, what of 2020 fit them and what didn't. So I'll give a good example, right? Like I said, we have had a very good year at Teachable this year, because the way the world has changed and digitalization accelerated, the demand for online-based learning has skyrocketed. As a result, our customers' businesses are booming, and luckily our business model is such that when our customers' businesses are booming, our business is booming as well. I think my personal takeaway is, especially in the growth stage, you never have space to not have a sense of urgency. Like, I think my biggest mistake this year has been that organic bump to our business led me to not feel the hellhounds on our trail. And I want to make sure that I my takeaway is that even if things are going great, even if things are trending perfectly, you should never let that lead to complacency, or like think that you're somehow magically doing great. You have to always be in this massively pessimistic or almost paranoid mindset of like, what if this all ends tomorrow? Because then when, someday it might end, you'll have to have built for it. You'll have invested in the things, once you have that time and space, that once the weather turns bad, will actually then get you through the tough times.
Yeah, totally. It's so valuable, right? There is an exercise that I do sometimes with teams, which is called red teaming. And it's basically imagining, if there was a team of people highly skilled and trained, especially for that purpose, to put you out of business right now, what would they do? What would be your weak spots that they would take advantage of, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's so useful, as you say, particularly when things are going great, because I think we're all human and we all have the tendency to become a little bit complacent when things are going great.
Yeah, luckily we don't really have to do that exercise hypothetically, because one part of being in a massive boom industry is that
True.
That is actually, you don't have to imagine it. You can just look out your window and see all those really capable, smart, and most of all, rapidly moving teams coming after you. So then the question really is that, okay, these are all companies that started yesterday. What do we have that they don't have? Like they have all the pace of development. They have, they don't have 5 to 10 years of questionable experiments left to linger, and they don't have that mountain that they're handcuffed to. But they also don't have the scale. They don't have the heft. They don't have the book of business. So then the question is like, okay, are we going to start fighting them at kind of head to head combat where, you try and outpace them with their, zero product footprint or whatever? Or do you really lean in on those things that your dominant market position might provide you? So anyway, it's definitely not something we have to be hypothetical about, because the online or knowledge-based business landscape has exploded this year.
True. So let's shift to the rapid fire questions section. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions in rapid succession. And basically the idea is that you will try to answer them in under 2 minutes. Are you up for the challenge?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. So how do you define organizational culture?
It's how people describe, it's how people organically describe how your organization operates. I think that's the measure of it. It's not, what you do, it's how people operate in it and how they tell the story.
And what are the signs that a company culture might need some work or perhaps even a major overhaul?
Obviously the easiest ones are things like massive attrition or whatever. Actually, I don't fully agree with that. Sometimes attrition can be really good for culture. I think it's a question of, is it fit for purpose? Is the culture aiming for the goals that the company, the business, the product, the organization should have right now? Like I've described several times, like early on, you just need that, like, stop researching, stop pontificating, just ship. That is the right culture. And the early stage culture where like there's no barriers, no silos, no nothing. It's just one team of generalists in a room just hacking away at the next idea. That is a fit for purpose culture for that stage. It might not be for the later stage. So I think it's really, there's no like, this is not exactly true, but there's no like bad culture or good culture. Does the culture fit where the company is at, what it needs to achieve?
Yeah.
And that's harder to define. Like, these are the characteristics of a bad culture outside of the obvious, like straight up bad culture, which is, when things get nefarious.
Yeah, totally toxic. Yeah, I love that. And the word that comes to my mind is that culture, just like leadership styles, is situational. So absolutely, depending on the situation, the context, what's going on, it needs to evolve and shift. And so, yeah, love it. And how about, well, just kind of funny in the context of your answer, but anyway, I'm going to ask the question: do you admire any companies for their culture? And if yes, why?
I should really have a good answer for this, but I really don't. I mean, the obvious answer for me has always been Spotify.
Uh-huh.
It's a super cop-out answer because it's such a poster
Yeah.
child for, very agile-minded, cross-functional,
Mm,
cross-departmental development. I think I'm going to stick with that. Being Nordic, I of course admire their them wanting to uphold the Swedish core values and really be a Swedish company even at their current
hmm.
mega scale. Yeah, I guess that's really the best and most well-known
Cool. I'll
answer.
take it. I'll take it. Do you have any books on culture or on leadership that you would like to recommend our listeners read?
Yes, two come to mind right away. One is my by far favorite book on anything around this, which is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I think
Hmm.
I'm on my fifth. Like I just wrapped up my fifth time.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
it's
it's
great.
it's such a fast read. First of all, like
Hmm. Hmm.
you should be able to read it. Or I'm doing audiobooks right now, so it was basically like a couple of long walks. Every time you read it, the book is different because it's basically built for mirroring your recent experiences, and you always reflect on your last year, the team you worked with, the team you've managed, whatever. The other book is Culture Code. It's a more recent one, but it's just such a profound uh, collection of both science and
Yeah,
anecdotes that
great
are
stories.
very very engaging. And I think Culture Code and Five Dysfunctions as like a combo really build upon what is really like what is
Mm.
strong teamwork, what is strong interdisciplinary culture.
Hmm. Awesome. And what is one thing that our listeners could do tomorrow, literally tomorrow, to build their own culture lab and start cultivating a sort of culture that will help them and their teams to bring their vision to life?
I think at least for the types of culture, if we're talking about like software companies, software development, and we're talking about in the context of product development teams, I think the number one exercise is pushing the whole team, at the very least the management layer, but preferably the whole team, to start contextualizing their work in terms of financials, in terms of business, whether it's like a couple of exercises on thinking about the P&L, thinking about, how much does it cost to do X? How much does it cost to maintain this feature that we've had? Really doing cross-functional thought exercises around the raw finances of building, maintaining, and evolving the product to kind of loosen up the thinking or unclog the thinking of how might an investor, how might a board member, how might a CFO look at what we're doing. And so, when we start talking about like agile transformations or why don't leadership teams ever let us really be agile, you start really contextualizing it. Like, what does it look like from a, quarter over quarter, year over year basis? And really think both about costs and revenue growth. I think that starts a transformation towards a healthy culture change. Because I think a lot of the current day agile transformations just start from like the premise it's obviously better to be an agile cross-functional organization, but then run into the problem that it might not look that way from the
Mm.
leadership team or the board's level.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, if there was one thing that you'd like our listeners to be going away from this interview with, or one thing that you'd like them to remember, what is it? What are your final thoughts?
I think the main thing really is that our industry really needs to wake up to the importance of strong product leadership as an agent of change, as an agent of culture, as an agent of building culture with a capital C, not just like small regional cultures in different departments. And culture when it comes to kind of, I mean, this is stating it wrong, but product led culture, letting the thing you're selling be
Mm.
the conduit of the type of company that you need to be. Um,
I love that, because I think what it does and what it says is that you actually focus on how you serve rather than anything else, which is how things should normally operate, because the business at the end of the day has been created to meet some sort of needs and serve people. So I think, in a way, having a product-led culture would be a sort of culture that is focused on serving customers in the best possible way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in order for that to generate the outcomes that I'm describing, everybody in the company, like from executive to intern, needs to be able to describe what are we building, who are we building it for, what are the value props, who is it not for. And that alone, that narrative around the identity and the DNA of the company and the product is such a unifying, such an aligning force, and it creates the environment in which good local cultures, what is the right marketing culture, what is the right sales culture for this type of product. If you lack that kind of central guiding line of who it's for and what it is, you're gonna, like I said, culture is the outcome of just your actions and your words. In absence of them, random cultures will start coming about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no page to land on. As I say sometimes, a common page that you'd like people to land on. Fantastic. Well, if people want to learn more about your thinking, your work, what are the best places for them to follow you or be in touch with you?
Well, you can always follow me on Twitter, but you get maybe a little bit too much of my thinking that way. If you want a more condensed version, my blog on my website, forsto.com, forsto.com, that in general summarizes all my LinkedIns and Twitters and all that good stuff over there. I'd say my blog and my Twitter are the two best channels, but definitely blog is for those who want more signal and less noise. And I do have a newsletter that I'm very, very passive on. Maybe you get like a couple of emails a year. That's on tinyletter.com/forsto. Again, FORSSTO.
Fantastic. And we're going to post the links in the show notes for our listeners. So just click on our website and you'll find everything you need over there. Tommi, thank you so much for this conversation. It has really been enlightening for me, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks,
I hope
Aga.
we can get you back soon.
Whenever you want. I'm right here waiting.
I'm Aga Bayer, the creator and host of the CultureLab podcast. And this is the CultureLab team.
Production Manager, Lindsay Nunez.
Art Director, Emily Spencer.
Aaron Scott, Content Editor.
Sound Producer, James Eade, Be Heard.
If you haven't subscribed to the CultureLab yet, you can do it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and many other places where podcasts are available. If you'd like to subscribe to my newsletter, the CultureLab Insider, go to www.agabayer.com/podcasts and scroll down to the very bottom of the page. That's www.agabayer.com/podcast. Also, we would be ever so grateful if you could rate and review our podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. Before I give you a sneak peek into the next episode, here is a quick reminder. This episode is brought to you by the Culture Strategy Bootcamp, a virtual bootcamp that helps you create a thriving culture at scale. If you are a leader in a company that grows, and if you want to start turning strategy and culture into rocket fuel for meaningful growth, definitely check this out. We're putting together the first cohort of founders and leaders who want to strengthen their culture building and strategy shaping muscles. And just this once, we offer a 50% discount in tuition fees. You can learn more about the bootcamp by typing this into your browser: bit.ly/culture-bootcamp. That's bit.ly culture-bootcamp. And now a quick preview of the next episode. So insightful and so much fun. I had two guests this time, partners in life and at work, Frances Fry, who is a professor of technology and operations management at Harvard Business School, and her wife, Anne Morris, the executive founder of the Leadership Consortium. They both supported companies like Uber, Rework, and Riot Games with culture change, and they also wrote a wonderful new book on leadership called Unleashed, the Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You. I have to say that before I read their book, my favorite definition of leadership was by Quincy Adams. He said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. But I think that Anne and Frances beat Quincy Adams with this.
So our definition of leadership is that leadership is about making others better, first as a result of our presence, and then in such a way that it lasts into our absence. So we think that there are three really important words there: others, presence, absence. And the first mistake we've already talked about, which is that leaders can make it about them. The making others, once you get that, we usually realize, okay, we're going to make people better as a result of our presence. And then we mistakenly think it's okay if after we leave, things fall apart. In fact, we might even get a little bit of an ego boost because, I was statistically significant. When I was there, it went up, and when I wasn't there, it went down. And we're really trying to disabuse that idea, and that our job when we are there is to prepare people for when we're gone. And that the true testament to leadership is how well people do when we're not in the room.
Thank you for listening to this episode of CultureLab. If you found any moments that were interesting, inspiring, or maybe even game-changing, please share it with someone who'd appreciate it. After all, good ideas are meant to be shared.